Andy, you're going to start us off with a question that was submitted via an email.
Yes, it's from William, a Patreon subscriber.
Will.I.am, as he prefers to be called.
Yeah, thank you for subscribing, Will.I.am. The Champions League format is changing from next season.
Yay!
So I'd love to know what the lads' favourite memories are from their time watching this era of the competition.
Now, when he says this era, it doesn't go back perhaps as far, because the format was changed a bit when you had the two group stages.
Yeah, and before that...
Or am I nitpicking?
No, I don't think you are. And if you go back before that, you think of when Rangers nearly got to the final in the first ever edition in 92, 93. There were two parallel groups.
8 teams in the semi-finals.
And you got the finalists out of
8
it.
teams in the semi-finals.
Yeah, that does seem needlessly complicated, doesn't it?
It does.
It's interesting to go into this new era, isn't it, before we get onto our highlights of the era that's just passing, because it feels to me like the Champions League is going to be a lot harder next season, purely because of the it's going to feel like more of a slog with a kind of league situation.
Less of a break.
Also, less of a break, 2 extra games at least. And also there's the playoff situation as well, if the playoff games get into the last 16 proper. But also that sometimes you play a team away but you won't play them at home.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could end up in like the Bernabeu, and have like no chance to have a swing at them at your gaff. Like it's going to be really, really hard. So I'm intrigued to see how that affects the sort of latter stages of the competition. If it's essentially just the same names and same faces are there, it feels more likely than the opposite.
Although with Real Madrid, you could argue in knockout games particularly, I know you're talking about group games, but they're more likely to duff it up at home than they are away.
Sure.
They are indeed. So some memories. One of my favourite ever celebrations in football was Mourinho running across the pitch for Inter at Barcelona.
Oh, I thought you were going to say at Old Trafford.
I thought you were going to say that.
Would that be 2 group? I don't think that was 2 group phases. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
No, it wasn't.
I don't think we're going to nitpick. That was a good one. No, but across the pitch. Because again, you watch it back, when the referee peeps for full time, he's already halfway across the pitch. Unbelievable pace. It's just the way he's celebrating. He cannot believe it. And also, that to me is peak Mourinho.
In dress shoes as well.
Oh, yeah. Full suit, the lot. And then they turn on the sprinklers.
I think could we have a little mensch for when Man United won at Juventus and he got out there and gave some to the Juventus fans?
Oh, shushing them.
I mean, that was fun.
That was good. But there's been a few, and Mourinho has been
involved in all of them.
Involved in a fair few of them. It is not unfair to say, but that one leaps to mind. That whole Inter run was incredible as well when they did the treble. That's a memory that leaps to mind. For me,
I think it's a fairly obvious one, but partially I choose it because you and I were there for one of the defining moments of it, Marcus, is Pep Guardiola's Barcelona.
Yeah.
We were lucky enough to be at the final in 2009, and it was incredible to watch the way they played, and to experience the day of it as well, and quite how raucous the Barcelona fans were. It felt like Rome felt like their city that day. Yeah. Then when you got into the ground, the United fans gave as good as the Barcelona fans did in terms of volume.
For a bit.
Yeah, but it was just the dominance of it, and obviously that second final where they beat Man United at Wembley as well was probably even better in terms of a performance. But it's just the way they played the game, wasn't it? It really, I suppose, it was quite a formative time for us as football fans as well, given the age that we were. But it did feel like they've completed it. Like they have just figured out how to do this to perfection, and it's astonishing.
It felt a bit like when we were a lot younger, of course, when New Labour were in power. With Blair, you thought, this is how it looks now. They'll be in forever.
Yeah.
Pep Guardiola's Barcelona will win the Champions League now forever and ever and ever. And of course, all things come to an end, right?
But it's
that moment, it just felt like football is, as you say, completed. We're standing still now. And actually, where do you go from here? I just think it's going to be more of this.
But I guess that's the thing about it. If you're talking
and
about...
then Zinedine Zidane came along to Real Madrid.
I think that's it, though. If you're talking about the pinnacle of sport, which should be jeopardy as well as high quality, because now I think it's defined a little differently. We're used to European leagues where the same team wins it year after year after year, even in the Premier League now. But that was still the point, as you say, pre-Zidane, when teams didn't retain the Champions League. And that bit, winning it 2 out of 3, that was Barcelona's moment. That's an enormous achievement. Winning it 2 out of 3, and they should really have won it the year in between as well. because they were definitely the best team in it.
Mourinho stopped them, though.
Yeah, he certainly did. And I just think when you look at that point, it does feel like, that they were such an incredible team to win it those 2 years out. It did feel an absolute apex for European football. And you look back on that and you think that Guardiola team really, I mean, for reasons of him being exhausted, again, mainly by Mourinho, they should have won it like 4 or 5 times in a row.
I know what you mean.
Like they were so good. But that can't take away from how good they actually were. And as you say, I think it's quite interesting. We talk about football all the time, 3 times a week, but I find it quite curious that when we mention Guardiola's Barcelona to you, and this is after 7-8 years of having him in the Premier League, and people, to be honest, getting a bit bored of City. Whenever you mention, listeners, Pep Guardiola's Barcelona to Marcus, his eyes light up.
Yeah,
and it's amazing. Actually, it's amazing to me. I mean, I would
and Frank Rijkaard's Barcelona.
Oh yeah,
that whole period.
Yeah, well, that's worth mentioning because people were talking about Frank Rijkaard's Barcelona as the greatest club side of all time. They were saying, "Oh, he surpassed the dream team. This is incredible." And then straight away, it's topped again. And I think that team is quite unfairly forgotten.
Well, yeah, it's kind of the basis on which the foundation on which Guardiola builds his Barcelona, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
Even if it's slightly ruined. It's a ruined, beautiful castle by then.
Which is, I think, what we prefer.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the National Trust gives you.
Yeah,
it's also what the new camp is.
Yeah. Well, it's being built now, Jim. But the only other memory that I would like to chuck in as well was in the 2018-19 edition when Liverpool would play Spurs in the final. The semi-finals in that competition.
Oh, yes.
They are 2 of the greatest comebacks you'll ever witness for differing reasons. Spurs are obviously 1-0 down to Ajax after the first leg. And that Ajax side, they should have got to the final, really, but they didn't.
But that is remarkable. When you think of a side outside, and we talked about this on Ask OTC yesterday, a side outside the big 5 leagues in Europe, in the modern game, who started in the second qualifying round that year.
Who were incredible. They beat Real Madrid and then beat Juventus.
Yeah, away from home.
Yeah. They were remarkable, but that's not the point I'm saying. It is the turnaround. So Ajax go into the second leg 1-0 up, of course, and they go 2-0 up in that game, and then Spurs. I've never seen a game that was so dead and buried, and for them to come back, and because it happened the night after the Liverpool one. But the difference with the Liverpool one was when they're 3-0 down and Messi buries that unbelievable free kick in the Nou Camp. Liverpool, it's like, oh, can they win by 4 goals or take it to extra time penalties or whatever? Can they do it? And you go, and as Klopp said, because it's you, we believe, because it's Anfield, we believe. And you think to yourself, there have been great European nights. My goodness, they'll need the ultimate one. And that game is Klopp's defining legacy, I think.
Mo Salah in his T-shirt.
Exactly. They didn't even have some of their best players.
Yeah.
Divock Origi's playing up front, has the game of his life.
Origi and Wijnaldum score the goals.
Wijnaldum, like by chance, really comes on as an early substitute, and
Trent's right foot was its most wand-like I think we've seen.
I remember that Halloween. That's such an iconic moment. That Halloween, I was walking down my road trick or treating with my kids, and I walked past all the incredible displays that people have got in their room, and someone has carved in their pumpkin corner taken quickly.
Really?
Yeah. Because it's just such an iconic moment.
Yeah.
It's just one of those. It's like Rome has risen from its ruins.
But I think that the Liverpool one, again, you don't have to compare. You can just enjoy them both. The Liverpool, there's such different comebacks. The Liverpool one, you think, can they score early? Can they do this? Can they do that? Oh, it still seems so unlikely. Because they're playing against Messi, for crying out loud. When the second goal goes in, and then the third, and you think, oh my goodness, it's all right. And you'll kind of, come on, there it is. And even when they score with 10 minutes to go, whatever it was, Barcelona are dead. But the Spurs one, again, is just so different. Just dead. They were better. Unbelievable. Ajax was singing.
And the player who turns it around.
Yeah.
He won't even really go down as a Spurs great, will he?
Yep, Lucas Moura. He'll always have that. So yes, that's another memory from this era of the Champions League.
When I was going to talk about my favourite memory, I was straight away going to talk about the fact that this era, as William puts it quite correctly, it's the era of the Champions League comeback, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what defines it for me as well.
Yeah,
and I think part of that is that, everyone loves a comeback in football, but on the grandest stage, it's all the more spectacular. And I think it happens more often precisely because of the stage. The sense of drama and the sense of stakes are so much higher that it feels like it enables it because happen fairly often.
Unlike in most other football, you're prepared to risk everything.
You're right to say that. Jim, you've got the next question.
Yeah, I guess we'll just end with John Terry slipping over. But I do have another question from Joel on Instagram. He says, the Champions League final will feature 2 English players who have moved abroad to play their best football. With Jadon Sancho returning to Dortmund after things didn't work out at Man United, who else could do a Sancho and revive their career with a move abroad?
Yeah, obviously both players are very different journeys in football. I mean, Sancho has, as it's rightly said, he's returned to Dortmund. I mean, Bellingham, it was really either going to be Manchester City or Real Madrid where he wanted to go, and he very much wanted to go to Real Madrid, and fair play to him for that. To answer the question, there has been talk that Calvin Phillips might go abroad.
Yeah, Phillips is the obvious one, isn't he? He's 28 now.
Yeah.
So you would have thought he'd have gone to RB Leeds if they got promoted. That would have been a nice fit, wouldn't it? But that seems extremely unlikely while they're in the Championship. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's hard to... I think you have to uncouple this question from how it affects the national team. Because Italy's a funny one. You look at Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Fikayo Tomori and Tammy Abraham, all doing well out there, but seem to just not be on the radar.
But
certainly, Tomori's, he's been in squads and stuff.
I guess the question there is that a Southgate thing? Because clearly Southgate just does not rate Serie A at all. So, I mean, if you... Depending on who the next England coach is, if England change coaches after the Euros, does that make players who are doing well in Italy more interesting, more approachable?
Yeah. But they are all
the chat is
having a successful career, though, aren't they?
The chat is to revive their career. I mean, you could extend that to just further their career if you like. I mean,
revive their career globally, club career. It could be.
Tomori was a young player. Tomori's a young player when he leaves Chelsea.
Yeah,
you know. So again, I don't think it's to revive his career per se. He's had a good time at AC when he's won the title. He's played latter stages Champions League.
But Jim's right to say Serie A because you look at Ashley Young, Chris Smalling, etc. I mean, when I initially read this, I didn't necessarily read English players because you could say Romelu Lukaku would be another one, for example, and then he made the daft decision to come back to Chelsea.
What about Marcus Rashford? The difficulty is the money, isn't it?
But I think he would. PSG have been interested in him for a really long time, and I think that would be very mutually beneficial.
I wonder though if we all think they could revive their career, but you wouldn't want them to kind of just fall away down the pecking order and then go into a bit of obscurity, which has happened. I mean, look at say someone like Ross Barkley who tried to revive his career. He's actually revived it at Luton Town, and vice versa. Not all foreign players who come here, they hit the ground running and have a good time.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because English players used to go abroad so little that it did feel like this was a completely different thing to foreign players coming here. And actually, what's gradually happening is that it's just not that unusual. No. It's becoming more and more common, and that's obviously a good thing.
The break to it, as you said, is money. Because in a cultural sense, and we always think English people need to impose their own culture. They find it difficult to culturally adapt. But you know what? I think that's a bit assuming when you look at a younger generation, the generation of people of under 30. Not only is might they want to seize this opportunity, but I think in strictly football terms, you look at the way that these footballers have grown up and the football culture that they've grown up in. Is playing FIFA. Yeah. And so like PSG or Dortmund or Bayern or Barcelona are far more relevant to them than say, I don't know, Southampton or Sheffield United or whatever.
Where they take their influences. Here's one more name that, if you don't mind, we'll finish on. Mason Mount.
It's a good shout. Very good shout.
Currently at obviously Manchester United. I know he's had his injuries.
You're convinced it's not going to work, aren't you?
Well, I just don't see him where he's
but you were always convinced it wasn't going to work, which is really interesting actually, and you've been proven. I mean, his injuries haven't helped. Obviously, I know that it's likely there's a new manager at the time of recording. Ten Hag's still in the job. I just think Mount, with his footballing brain, with what he's got, I think that in this country, where does he go? If he was to, say, drop down in terms of size of club, right now, say, like Aston Villa would be an option, but they probably don't have the money to buy a player like that. Is he going to go and is he going to get signed by, say, Liverpool
or Arsenal. It's unlikely, isn't it? Very, very unlikely.
I think until you've proved yourself, no one's going to lay out that amount of money.
Exactly.
It's like the Jadon Sancho problem, going back to the original question, isn't it?
So
it's a very specific list of destinations, probably.
Whereas if it was somewhere like, say, Bayern, we know like they're like an Englishman at the moment. Somewhere like that, or even a Dortmund or something, you could go, oh, actually.
Actually, the link I heard recently that I think would be very, very interesting, particularly after the season he's had, Jack Grealish to Bayern.
Do you know what? I was going to mention Grealish, and I went from Mason Mount instead.
Grealish thrive abroad?
Well, no,
personality type is a big part of it, isn't it?
But that's the thing. I think we make a lot of assumptions about Jack Grealish. Whereas, actually, I think if you look at his competitiveness, I think if you look at his ability to try out new stuff, and he did that by going to Manchester City. I mean, which is a massive leap. I know going to Manchester City, even if you're a massive star, that you aren't going to play all the games. And he's someone who
different though, and that's a big part of it.
But if you're going to move abroad, I mean, England to Germany is a bit more familiar than say.
He would.
But I take the point you're saying.
He would have Englishmen around him, and we're just assuming he wouldn't thrive in that environment because he's not been in it, which I think is a bit.
Yeah,
we just don't know. It might not. You might be right. But
I would be excited if Grealish did that move, because he at Manchester City. We knew this would happen, and obviously in the treble-winning season, he still had some moments, but he has become quite predictable and quite un-Grealish-like in his role this season at City. I'm not using a great season, but I want him to be a little bit more creative and swashbuckling.
I agree with you. There's a bit of, as well as he did for Manchester City in the treble-winning season, I think there's a little bit of Joe Cole going to Chelsea about it. If you could, like he's done very well, but I think if you could see him spread his wings somewhere else, potentially in a league that, for example, is very open, very high octane, quite tactically chaotic at the moment. Imagine Grealish in that kind of environment.
Yeah, agreed. Right, I've got a question here from @TheBridgePod on X. Which players might not have the best stats, but were key to their team across the history of football? Across the history of football, Jim Campbell.
It's a broad scope, and actually the player who springs to mind under that remit is Maxwell. Who Maxwell won 37 trophies in his career. Obviously played
incredible.
for
Not
Ajax.
one of them the Community Shield.
Not one of them the Community Shield. All of them with Zlatan, I presume. Because genuinely, it seemed to be the case that if you wanted Zlatan Ibrahimovic, you had to sign his friend Maxwell.
Yep.
And presumably Maxwell has given him a Champions League as well.
Well, he did win the Champions League, didn't he?
Yeah.
So he's won 37 trophies with Ajax, Inter, Barcelona, and PSG. Obviously, the latter inflate that a bit. But it's still extremely, extremely impressive. And in terms of his playing stats, I couldn't really tell you, what his pass completion percentage was or anything. But
don't worry,
he isn't a player where he's thought of as one of these sort of all-time greats. And I think you'd argue he isn't an all-time great. Very good player, very functional player, very reliable player, obviously. But that is an astonishing return.
Well, and his appearance, he's not just the type of guy who played 5 appearances, but that season they won the treble.
He was an ever-present.
Yeah,
really, really, really unsung for some reason.
Yeah, Ajax, Inter, Empoli on loan, Barcelona, PSG. Decent CV. It's a decent CV. It's a lovely answer, that. I'm going to go back to Liverpool, actually. We talked about some of the Champions League memories. It's an obvious one, but that doesn't mean to say it's one shouldn't go for. Roberto Firmino, in terms of goals scored, really, which is what you look at strikers. Just a lovely, lovely player. And that front three, of course, of him, Mane and Salah, one of the best attacking lineups we've seen, quite frankly.
Yeah.
He was just such a delightful part in it. And again, went a while without goal scoring. I remember when he scored at Anfield once, and I went, it's his first goal at Anfield for 5 months or whatever. You think, bloody hell. That seems crazy, right? You think a guy with a goal scoring record like that may not be pulling his weight. People would say, oh, he's the weak link up there or the other two. But we know what a delightful footballer Roberto Firmino was, with those feet and that smile, Andy. So in terms of your kind of obvious raw stats that you look at for a particular position, that I thought Roberto Firmino.
For similar reasons, I'm going to go for Luka Modric.
Ooh.
Because Modric is not underrated, but his stats don't come anywhere near describing what he's able to do. I mean, this season, for example, in La Liga, he finished up with 2 goals and 6 assists. He's only once he's managed 6 assists once before in a league season
Wow.
in his entire career. He's only scored 5 league goals in a season once. But it almost seems vulgar to talk about him with statistics. Really,
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Really, what you and I have described, certainly with Firmino and Modric, they're players who are the glue of their team, and it's particularly amazing in an era where we are obsessed with statistics, mainly because of the incredible volume of Leo Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. And so, like the Ballon d'Or, for example, and this is where Modric, I suppose, comes into the conversation, the Ballon d'Or has just become this sort of statistical fuckfest, basically, hasn't it?
Oh, blimey, Andy. What a turn of phrase.
Well, do you know what I mean? Like,
It's your Saturday too, I suppose.
Thank you very much. when you get to a little bit joyless in a way, in that we don't appreciate footballers for how they make us feel, but it's how many goals did he score this year? How many assists did he get this year? Which team trophies did he win this year? And it's
not a spreadsheet, is it?
I thought
no, exactly, Jim. And you know, for that, Modric ended up getting the Ballon d'Or. And it's always with the MVP in the NBA, for example, is the narrative.
Yes.
Otherwise, LeBron James would have won it like 7 times in a row or whatever, as opposed to the relatively modest like 5 times that he did win it. And it's just when Modric got it, it was almost a critical mass of, look, we really love this guy. And these guys can't win it every single year. Yep. And so the World Cup, being the apex that it is, certainly maybe not of football competence these days, but certainly a football celebration, and celebrated by people who are not just football fans. There was the world saying, we love you, Luka Modric. And it's amazing because since then, he's been more influential for Real Madrid than he was when he actually won that. But in terms of never giving the ball away, manipulating the shape of the team, keeping it moving, he's so valuable in so many different ways. And they're ways that will be indefinable for a lot of football fans.
I thought you were going to mention Dennis Bergkamp for all those reasons, Jim.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, I mean, again, because Manchester United fans would probably say Eric Cantona. Yeah. In terms of goal scoring and so on, not chipped in. And when we mentioned a Chelsea player for these boys who've submitted this question, but Didier Drogba. Yeah. You know, famously, didn't score the amount of goals that a striker of his status may, because he is an absolute legend. He had
a few seasons where he had very good returns, didn't he? But
2 seasons where he scored over 20 goals. I think
it feels like he scored more than he did.
It took him. But it's the personality as much as
what he means,
else,
and scoring in big games,
the talismanicness of him.
Indeed, I think that's the beauty of it. When a player like that is celebrated so much, is because it's not just about the goals, it's about what you bring to the team, because it is a team game, lest we forget. And that's why individual awards sometimes are a bit funny, but that's why it was so great.
Messi and Ronaldo have made us forget that.
But they have. But that's why, for the reasons you stated, it was great when Modric won the award. It felt an award for the little guys. The Real Madrid man won the award. Jim, you got the last question.
I do. Wifflebat has been in touch on the Discord. Wifflebat Wiffles. I have a hypothetical question for the mailbag. It's deep into stoppage time at the final of the Euros. England are hanging on to a slender 1-goal lead when Kylian Mbappe suddenly bursts free and is one-on-one with the keeper. He's surely going to equalise and send the game into extra time, or even to penalties if this happens in extra time. When at the last second, an England player, let's say Luke Shaw, appears from nowhere and Ben Thatchers him into unconsciousness. He gets sent off, but France don't convert the free kick and England hang on and finally win a major trophy again after 58 years. Does Luke Shaw get hailed as a national hero and top shithouse for saving England's glorious win, or does he become a pariah and is the tournament win considered tainted as a result?
Which of us is going to give the obvious answer to this?
It's the first one.
It is, isn't it?
And I'll tell you why, is because it is a cultural thing. I think that if I may wifflebat, the more trickier question to answer would have been if Harry Kane dived. Now I know in this land of footballing land with VAR, is less likely, but it can still happen. He clearly dives and for whatever reason deceives people, converts the penalty in the last minute, and England win. I think that is, in this country, tainted.
Maybe, but I think people still don't care about that.
No, I think you're missing the seriousness of the question. He's talking about knocking a person out.
Oh,
talking
it's
about genuinely really, really hurting someone.
Yeah, okay.
I think that would be way worse. Way worse. Yeah, definitely. And I think actually...
Yeah, you're right. I think I did gloss over the unconsciousness.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it would absolutely be tainted in air quotes because the closest thing you can think of, I think, and maybe this is Anglocentric, is the hand of God goal, right? And I think I bring it to that one because Argentina did go on to win it. It is a part of that story, and it's probably the most well-known part of that story. Yeah, Argentinians probably don't care about that. We know Maradona didn't care about it. If anything, he loved it. Absolutely,
but that's a cultural thing.
Indeed. So, but I do think the rest of the world would be like, well, that was a disgrace. That was, that was outrageous.
Are we talking about how we perceive it here? Isn't this a question of self-image rather than world image?
Yeah.
Because what you were saying before, Marcus, about a tough tackle and a tough tackle that's completely illegal is always kind of okay, whereas the idea of some sort of trickery is not okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's levels of trickery. Like if you pull someone back by the shirt at a corner or whatever, that's considered fine. That's considered like proper defending.
Yeah.
Whereas diving's just,
diving is the lowest.
Not part of our game.
So I think the diving one. I know that's not the question, but I think if say Kane or Saka or whoever were to dive, England get penalties, win. I'll be honest with you. Yeah, it would slightly taint it for me. To be perfectly honest with you. However, that's not the question. Yeah, I think so. Whereas this is the question. I think, I think if he clearly tries to go in and I mean, obviously, Wifflebat has specifically said knocks him unconscious. So like a proper elbow to the face.
Yeah.
We're talking Schumacher Batista.
Well, the example he uses is Ben Thatcher on Pedro Mendes, which was absolutely awful.
Right. So to be perfectly honest with you, Jimmy, I think it actually would because when I read that, I think, oh, he's gone in for a big tackle, wiped him out. Mbappe stood up and gone, that's a disgrace. They've had an argument, Shaw sent off, and Mbappe's shaking his head going, what a load of bollocks. But that's not what Wifflebat has stated.
But that comes...
Yeah,
but that comes back to a different thing, doesn't it? The question of intention, which is always totally assumed.
Ben Thatcher mentioned it.
Sure.
Did you need any more questions about intention?
But that's the point. That wasn't in a sporting play, was it? It was in a nothing situation. We're talking about something where a player is clean through on goal. So if there's...
I love it, Andy. You're helping me if this happens.
If he gets totally knocked unconscious...
That's his fault.
Yeah, exactly.
Get on the weights. Be better. Get good.
Shouldn't be running towards goal. Shouldn't be running towards goal.
Yeah.
I think the point is... Luke Shaw's not going to think, right, I'm going to... Or whatever player isn't going to think, right, I really want to hurt him.
Elbows to the face.
I want to make sure he can't get up from this. I want to make sure he can't ride this tackle, which is different to deliberately laying someone out.
Ended Kylian Mbappe's career? One of the finest
way.
Footballers we've ever seen, and it ends his career.
Well, that's almost impossible to do nowadays, isn't it?
Andy, I love that you're avoiding this. Yeah. You look at you. You've got England Euro fevers. He's like, come on.
I want to take it back to the word tainted.
Right.
Because for me, I think in this context, what that really means is a permanent association with a single incident, right? And I think if that scenario were to play out, you couldn't uncouple the two things. It would always be the World Cup that was won like that. In the same way that the hand of God is associated with
hand of God is
86 and 78. Maybe has a few questions over it as well.
But I think the 86 goal is scored. Whereas this, you don't know if Mbappe is going to score.
It's the Suarez-Ghana situation.
It is.
The thing though, Marcus is right, Jim. Like 86 World Cup might be the way that like 90% of English people define Maradona. It's not the way the rest of the world defines Maradona.
No, exactly.
I think the hand of God goal is possibly the most famous incident in all of football. I think that's true to a point.
But fine.
I think we think about it more here.
It can be,
but also he scored one of the greatest goals ever in the same game. I do think that's globally famous.
But did it taint it though? For most of the world,
no, certainly not for Argentina because they consider themselves the underdogs, right? But I think we
and they love shit out,
and we also love talking about how outstanding we are, and it's a load of fucking post-colonial deluded nonsense, really, isn't it? In a sense, I think in this country it would definitely be an issue for people.
I think less so now. I think the diving would be more of an issue, to be perfectly honest.
I agree with you.
Look. I hope it happens.